Okay, welcome back. This is the 2022 Virtual Residency Workshop. It's Monday, June 27th. This is the early afternoon session. I'm delighted to welcome our speaker. Bruce Mason is faculty in OU's physics department, physics and astronomy department. I first heard him give an earlier version of this talk, I want to say more than a decade ago. And it so jazzed me up that I wanted to be able to share it with all y'all, not just this year, but we've done this a good number of times. I think probably 4 or 5 times now. And I love this session to death. So I'm just going to throw the baton over to Bruce. Take the show away, Bruce.
Thank you, Henry, and I hope it still is jazzy for you. Early afternoon, I hope everybody has their proper beverages to keep you going for the session. Quick introduction. As Henry said, I'm a physicist. I'm a theoretical physicist. Little bit of background. In the late 80s, I did research work at the University of Illinois, actually in the building next door to the NCSA craze. Came here and did both computational physics research and also got involved in computation for education, particularly graduate students. And then long about the late 90s, I kind of turned left and went other directions. Hello from Illinois. Yeah, it's been a long time since I've been back there. One of the things that happened to me in the 90s, the late 90s, is that we got a new CIO, and he talked to me and said, I would like to have the faculty perspective on what's going on in IT at OU. Now, asking one person to give the faculty perspective is kind of an unreasonable request, because faculty, who knows what all they might say, but that's what I've tried to do for a very long time, to try to think about how faculty respond to efforts with IT and computation and so forth. This gets particularly much harder these days when computation is, as Henry has pointed out this morning, computation is now used everywhere. So I have a good colleague in English who's doing amazing data mining and analysis in literary analysis and image analysis. Just, you know, the number of people that are using this is going to just continue to grow. So it's going to be even harder to understand, you know, where they're coming from and what they're doing. So the point of this session, at least to begin with, is to make sure we're talking and have the same language. So I'm going to go through and sort of explain some of the language I'm going to use and the people I'm going to describe who are faculty members. But to start, I want to know about you. So open up your chat box. I'm going to use the chat box a lot, so I expect you to use the chat box a lot. And I want you to answer 2 questions. Well, one question is, do you have or have you had in the past an academic position? Yes or no? And if your answer is yes, describe briefly what that is. Okay. A postdoc, interesting. PhD, computational biology, okay. Information systems. Okay. Yeah, Dirk's answer is very brief, faculty. There you go. Oh, good. Okay, faculty of practice. Oh, a division chair. I'm going to have to watch my what I say. Got to be careful. Okay, some of you have various academic backgrounds. Please define academic position. That's what I'm going to be talking about next. Okay, PhD in computational chemistry. So for those of you, sure, GRA certainly counts. That's one of the groups that we're going to be talking about. So what I want to make sure is that if you have different views from the ones that I'm presenting, please speak up. Those of you in particular that have some experience with all this academic stuff, please make sure you speak up and provide your input and thoughts. So here we go. This is our vocabulary test. Well, the test is going to be at the end. So pay attention, but this is going to prepare you for the vocabulary test. So what I'm going to do is give you a second to go through this list and list the ones that one of these names that you're particularly unsure about. We're going to go through all of them, but I want you to read through them and say which ones of these am I not sure what they are. Okay. 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 Good. Good. Okay. Oh, not sure about VP research or VP administration. That's a good thing. Stay away from them. That'd be generally a good thing to avoid. Okay. So let's talk about some of these. So here we go. This is an overview of the academic structure. This is an overview of who does what in most academic institutions. And a lot of you said trustees or regents, sometimes they're governors, anything that starts with board of trustees, board of regents, board of governors. This is the appointed committee that is like a board of directors for an institution. And so these are the ones that oversee the operation from a high level. If you're lucky, and if you keep your head down, you probably will never have to deal with them. This is if you start getting things like vice president by your name, then you're in trouble. You're going to have to deal with them. Next, there's the administration. These are the people that run the institution. Usually, and again, this varies from institution to institution, but usually you have someone that is a president or a chancellor or something like this. Now, these terms are interchangeable. Sometimes the president is over a single campus, and if you have a multiple campus institution, then you have a chancellor over the presidents. Sometimes these are switched. But the president is the CEO. This is the chief executive officer. I was having a discussion with one of our administrator a while back that her job, she was a provost, I'll get to provost next, but her job was to keep all the things off of the president so the president can raise money. So a big thing that a president does is actually go out and raise money. Provost is usually the senior vice president, and the provost is involved in the academic side of the academic side of the institution. So they run the educational side of things. And then most big universities will have vice presidents for research, vice presidents for administration, vice president for research is over the research opportunities, vice president for administration runs the the operational, so kind of the COO. A lot of institutions will have a CIO or chief information officer, chief data officer. Sometimes that's at the VP level, sometimes that's below, but these are the ones that are, running the show, makes the big decisions. Next to them are the deans for colleges. So universities are broken into colleges. The dean runs these individual colleges. So the University of Oklahoma has something like 30 different colleges. We have 30 different deans doing different things. And then underneath each of the deans is the department chair or the department director, depending on what sort of department it is. So the department chair and the department director are usually are more of the faculty, direct faculty leaders. So when you get within a department, you have the department chair or director over everybody. And then you have a number of different levels of professors. And we'll get to the distinction between these, but essentially from bottom to top, these are all are more powerful professors within a department. The renewable term professor is different from the others in that the others, assistant, associate, full, and endowed, these are all professors that are either approaching tenure or trying to get tenure or have tenure. The renewable term professor is the one that is on a position that is not tenured. So it's, we'll talk more about what that means. Endowed professor, endowed chair essentially are different names for the same thing. So different places will call them different. Emeritus professor. Yeah, I didn't put in emeritus professor here. Emeritus professor is one who has retired, but emeritus faculty, although they're retired, quite often they keep doing research. So they are not teaching professors, but quite often you'll get emeritus professors that are still doing research, so they'll still come up. Some of them just refuse to retire, so it just never. Yeah, I mean, certificate programs are similar to this. With certificate programs, quite often you have fewer of the tenured associate and full professors and a lot more renewable term professors. But there's one other group I want to talk about. And these are, have various titles: research professor, research scientist. The renewable term professor may be in this other group as opposed to in the green group. A postdoc, graduate research assistants, instructors, adjunct instructors. These are all, again, faculty positions or research positions of some sort. Can anybody tell me the difference between the green box and the blue box? Tenure status, a lot less money, something else about money. There you go. The green stuff is on what's hard money, which means that they have lines that are in the university's budget. The blue ones are in soft money. So yeah, they're contract. They have to keep raising money to keep them going. Henry talked about this a little bit in the morning about, the research professor is one that has to keep bringing in grants just to pay his or her own salary. Whereas the green professors have the money from the institution, whether it's from the state or from, if it's a private institution, it's in the budget line for the institution. And yeah, bottom line, hard money is harder to get rid of, soft money is easier to get rid of. Yeah, the blue box has a lot of other things. I'm focusing on the academic side, but there's some people in sort of support regions that are sort of like research scientists. Yeah, there are some combinations of the two. There are some positions that are sort of go across both of these. But the basic idea is permanent, hard to get rid of, in the budget, not permanent, needs to continue to raise money if they're going to keep going. And so these are the people that we're going to consider here. In particular, we're going to be focusing on these ones in the green box, the professors, because you're going to be dealing with those, and as Henry said, we have some interesting quirks, and let's understand the interesting quirks that come with being a professor. So any questions about vocabulary before we go on to talking about tenure? Okay, I wanted to make sure we have the same sort of language. Okay, so let's talk about tenure. Again, I want to start by thinking about how you think about this. So try to define what is meant by academic tenure. I want your opinion. I want you to think about this and think about where you're coming from, because what you start with is important in terms of defining what you need to think about. So define academic tenure. Okay, freedom, a secured position, that's important. Big bucks, yeah. Anyway, I like the word historically. We'll talk about that too. Okay. Tradition, it is a tradition. Good, good. Okay. So this is directly from the OU faculty handbook. This is the description of tenure and academic freedom that comes directly from the OU faculty handbook. Yeah, tenure is changing. Tenure is, in fact, tenure is always changing somewhat. But yeah, I mean, this is what comes to, this is the description that's in the handbook that's supposed to run what I do at that faculty handbook. Any thoughts about this? Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of showing my bias by putting truth in red, but anyway. So I don't know about you, but in reading this, one word that comes to my mind is it's somewhat grandiose. Yeah, I kind of idealist. I don't know about dogma, but it certainly is puts a lot of if we really do this, it puts a lot of requirements on faculty who really try to do this in terms of unbiased and independent thought and professional responsibility. All of these things, pretty big things. But the main thing here is the freedom. as close to freedom as possible. Universities are not shifting away from tenure, but they are being pushed. They're getting some push from various places. I'll talk about that just a little bit at the end. Well, we'll talk about that at the end. So here we go. Let's talk about the tenure process. So the tenure process is the process that someone goes through in order to reach this level where you're respected enough to have this unfettered freedom to pursue your research, pursue your interest, to pursue your teaching. So let's talk about what this takes. And I'm going to start my timeline from when someone enters graduate school. So call year zero the entry to graduate school. First question, how long does it take to finish a PhD? Four to infinity, Okay, the people who are answering, it depends, that's really true, but let's look at the numbers. And just for the sake of argument, I'm going to use 6. 6 is in fact a little short. This is optimistic. But if you look at the numbers, here it is. So this bottom section here, which goes from 6 at a minimum to 8, these are the STEM fields. So this is life sciences, physical sciences, math, and so forth. So 6 is kind of an underestimate. If you look at the humanities, they're up here around 9 and 10. So for the arts and humanities, those tend to be up around 9 and 10. This top line is people that are in education. I mean, the education thing is usually they're working during their while they're doing their PhD. Yeah, you can send this to anyone you want and show them what the numbers should be. Okay, so you're finished with your PhD. This is an average over everybody. So that's why, for example, education is so long, is that, it really is usually part-time. Okay, you finished your PhD. To start tenure, you become an assistant professor. But any idea what the usual gap is between finishing your PhD and starting as the assistant professor? All right, postdoc, 3 years, 7 years, everything depends, but let's give an average. Now, this can vary a lot. Just for argument, I'm going to say 4 years. So you're now at year 10 from when you started graduate school. And again, this varies a lot, but this is something that most people do. In particular, in the life and the physical sciences, 60 to 70% of people do postdocs right after they finish their PhD. So this is the usual route. Postdocs, quite often are 2 years apiece. People quite often do 2 before they reach assistant professor. Some people do more. This is, just sort of just numbers that we can use. Oh, you haven't seen anything yet about convincing you not to pursue a PhD life. I mean, we're just getting started. Okay. So assistant professor is when the tenure clock starts. Associate professor, that, as Henry says, tenure takes 7 years. So that means that you get tenure year 17 after graduate school. So that means that tenure comes in when you're about 40. So when you talk about, getting this position that, is permanent position, uh, yeah, I mean, that starts about 40. So it's, if you think about, a 35 to 40 year work life, that's half of it. That's half of it right there when you reach tenure. So now let's talk about tenure. Let's talk about the process. So the tenure decision. Let's talk about what happens. So you're a new assistant professor. So you've just come in, you finish some postdocs, new assistant professor. What you need to do is you have 6 years to show that you're productive. So you need to show 6 years of academic productivity. Yeah, the 40 is if you start right out of undergraduate. A lot of people don't do that. So tenure decision, 6 years of productivity. At the end of those 6 years, you write your life story. You write, all the things that you've done, all the good research that you've done, everything that you've brought in, what you're teaching, your service. At the same time, your life story goes out to a bunch of external reviewers. These are people that, don't necessarily know you that well, but may know your research. So you get external researchers looking at your life story. Your life story and the reviews go to the department. So everyone in your department looks at your life story and votes up or down on whether or not you get tenure. After that, the vote goes to the dean in college, it goes to a campus tenure committee, it goes on up to the provost and the president. If you're in a supportive university, usually things don't change after the departmental vote, but it's been known to happen that things can go differently anywhere along this step. Now, put yourself in the position of the new assistant professor and put yourself in the position of this 7 years that it covers your academic productivity, writing your life story. What do you think your state of mind is during these 7 years? Interestingly enough, I mean, it's stressful. Yes, people are stressed. People are uh, worried. People are frantic. But also, what's more important is that they're extremely focused. And these are the sort of things that, they focus on. So this is what is actually measures your academic productivity. Do you publish? Are you bringing in money? Patents, consulting, reputation, so forth. These are all the things that are listed in terms of the academic productivity, but all of these are not equal. This is probably a better way to look at it. Publications, money, patents, those are the things that really get looked at. Money, Henry gave you some numbers about the possibilities for bringing in money. I have applied to grant programs where the chance of getting funding is like 10%. Why is service so small? Again, this is somewhat institution dependent. And teaching and service for some institutions, in particular smaller institutions, may be larger. But for the R1s and R2s and R3s, bringing in money and getting publications out is what's going to raise the um, reputation of the university and brings in money to the university. And therefore, those are the things that, frankly, get the most consideration on the tenure track. Service service has some things that are a little bit different from the publications and money, because sometimes service, quite often service is things like, serving on departmental or university committees, or serving on um, committees of your professional society. Um, and those can get you some credit, but for a good department, they will try to shield you from that, because publications, money, talks, those are the things that are really going to make a difference in the tenure decision. Yeah, and publications are all not the same, just like money's not all the same. The publications, it's also, are you publishing on the best articles? That makes a big difference. There are definitely gender issues in terms of expectations and requirements. Um, so gender issues certainly are a problem. We'll get to that in a little bit too. So again, as I said, particularly during this time, researchers are really focused. They need to be. So 2 years ago, I took some of the award-winning faculty at OU, and I looked up some of their publications. So what they get, and I looked up some really high-powered publications. And here's the sort of things I got: the name of publications, measurement of the TT bar production cross-section and top cross mass extraction using dilepton events in PP bar collisions. Now, I'm a physicist. I'm not a physicist in high energy physics, so I sort of understand this. But when you think about the faculty that you're working with, these are the sort of things that they're really focused on. So the idea of talking to them and listening to them, you got to be able to understand where they're coming from and their focus on very specific things. Here's another one. I think this was in, I forget if this was in history or English, but it's To Swear Like a Sailor, Language, Culture, and Meaning of the American Maritime World from 1750 to 1850. Pretty specific. Pretty specific. And one in my field, eliminating of threading dislocations in as-grown lead selenide film on patterned silicon 111 substrate using molecular beam epitaxy. Again, very specific. So this is the sort of focus that your faculty have. There you go. There you go. I'm sure that we could all come up with really excellent publication titles that show, really focus. And this is what they're focused. This is what they're going to get credit for. And so when you think about, when you talk to them and you work with them, this is what, this is where their mind is. And this is what's going to get them rewarded. Now, you can think about, what's the need for new faculty? So thinking about people coming into and deciding to go on to the tenure track. This is just from physics, and the numbers are a little bit small. But if you look at it, in this year, there was about 370 recruitments for tenure track faculty in physics in the US. Notice that the number of departures in the year before was 371. So we're just talking about replacement. Total, if you add up both tenure track, temporary, and other permanent, you get about 500. Notice also that of the ones that are leaving, those 371 departures, 16% of them are faculty that are leaving without tenure. So these are the faculty that didn't make it. So of the 370 that are leaving, 60 of them are people that did not make tenure or decided to leave without tenure. Now you can compare that to the total numbers. So at the same year, there are about 2,000 new PhDs that came out of physics departments. So you got 2,000 PhDs for 370 permanent tenured positions, and another 200 temporary positions. And so those are the sort of numbers. So yeah, why in the world would you do this? And, if you don't get tenure, sometimes you can try a second time, but basically no tenure, you leave. It's interesting, just this morning, I got an email newsletter from the National Center for Faculty Development. This is a center that helps faculty, that wants faculty to develop. And the title of this newsletter was, "Do you really want to be a faculty member?" So let's look at this. This is what people make coming out of their PhD by type of position. So mathematics, you're making nearly 150,000. If you go into private sector, you're making, about half that if you go into academic positions. That's kind of the biggest difference, math and computer science. But for all of them, why the heck would you do that when you can make an awful lot more by not going into academics? So why do people do this? Any thoughts? I mean, get into the head of your faculty members. Why in the world do they do this? Why did they go through this? Sunk cost of time already spent. I like that. That's a very skeptical point of view. Good job. It beats working. Yeah, well, still need to work. Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is passion. A lot of it is passion. It's passion, there's a certain prestige. The independence is great. Maybe it's just because they have no imagination at all, don't know what else to do. But and a lot of them really want to be in education. A lot of them really want to work with new people coming along to build up their, to show them what's going on with with their discipline. So it is passion, it is independence, it's all of these things. But you're really dedicated, and they're also, again, thinking about the faculty, they also have a certain point of view in terms of thinking about, yeah, this is really something that is important to me, and I understand what it's going to take. Yeah, we could spend a couple of talks on talking about how culture in academia, in fact, is a deterrent for an awful lot of people. So unfortunately, sometimes we get a certain type of people because of the culture. And that's a big problem that a lot of disciplines are trying to wrestle with. Okay, so yeah, and just the question of whether or not you even want a PhD is another one. Just getting a PhD shows that you have a passion for whatever it is that you want to study. So that's very true too. Okay, so getting tenure is not the end of your academic life. There's a joke about sea cucumbers and faculty that what's the difference? What's the similarity between faculty and sea cucumbers? Well, faculty sea cucumbers, when they anchor themselves, they throw up their brains and eat it. So they don't, because they don't need it anymore. And when faculty get tenure, anyway. So next up, associate professor, you can go on to become a full professor. There's no timeline for this. Some people don't do that. Some people do this as quickly as possible. For a full professor, you get a raise, you get more prestige, but it's not necessarily like it's automatic. So we can talk about this process too. So this is the promotion process. So from assistant professor to associate professor, almost always that happens at the same time that you get tenure. So you go from assistant professor to associate professor, you get somewhat of a raise, you get tenure. And then if you want to go to full professor, you got to continue to be more proven, more established. You need an international recognition. And when you want to go up for full professor, you go through a process very much like the tenure process. You write up another life story. You get more external evaluations. You get talked about by your department and your university. The only difference here is that if you don't get full professor, you don't get kicked out. But this is again the process that goes on for full professor. The considerations are the same as for tenure, but there's more stress about leadership, becoming recognized internationally in your field. And this is where you quite often do more disciplinary service, so that maybe you'll serve on the board of your professional society or committees of your professional society. So there's a lot more, a little bit broader aspect here. But again, it's publications, money, patents, books that again are the real considerations for reaching full professor. And now there's one more level that a lot of you had questions about. And this is the so-called endowed professorships. Sometimes they're called endowed chairs. These are recognitions of sort of the most productive or the most recognized researchers in a discipline. But the way these work is rather different. So to get endowed professorships, it starts with the university, and a university has to raise a bunch of money. So they raise a bunch of money. This may have strings attached, it may not. It depends on where the money comes from. And then the university takes that money and they go out and they steal somebody. Excuse me. They recruit from other institutions their best stars, and they recruit them because they have a bunch of money. And then The expectation is that they're going to recruit people that are going to bring in a bunch more money. So this is again a way to raise the prestige of the university and to bring in more support for the research institution, to support more postdocs, to support more graduate students, and so forth. I don't know, idealistic maybe. And then quite often with the endowed professorships, what the endowed professorships do, because they've got this money, is they set up their own fiefdom and they run their research group sort of as their own thing. So that is the approach to endowed professorships. Now, there are sometimes you could endow professorships internally. Sometimes universities raise money to support people within the university. So it's not always that they go out and steal someone. But some of the big names, the big endowed professorships, that was, they were bought. Yeah, everybody has fiefdoms. This is just one place that fiefdoms are sort of built into the whole process. Brandon, I'm sorry. Sometimes you just got to see how the sausage is made. But, the other thing is, these are the people that you're working with. And this is, their upbringing, if you will. Now, there's other things that happen after tenure. So it's not that when you have tenure, nothing else happens and you're set for life. Most institutions, in fact, now pretty much everyone is, this is specific to US. Other like European institutions are somewhat different, but this sort of approach is true in a lot of places. In fact, in a lot of European institutions, the full professors have even more power and independence than in the US. The Herr Doctor professors at research institutions in Germany, they have a lot of power. They're very independent. Demigods. Okay, thank you. That's an excellent word for it. They're demigods. Okay, so once you get tenure, that doesn't mean that you're home free. Most places have what's called post-tenure review. It's essentially a 5-year evaluation. This works differently in different places. And again, you asked about changes in tenure. This is in fact some place where changes are happening more. There's more pressure, particularly in public institutions, to think more about this post-tenure review process. But here it goes. After 5 years, you write up an evaluation of what you did. So you describe what you've done and what you're going to do in the future. Then it goes to the department, and the head of your department, the chair and lead professors evaluate it and say, yeah, this looks good, or maybe not. They look at your annual evaluations. So you have an evaluation each year, and that goes into this. And then they have a recommendation that goes to the dean and the provost saying, okay, this is what we think about the evaluation. At this point, there's two things that could happen. Either it's everyone's happy with it, and therefore you're okay, but in 5 years, you're going to be doing this again. And again, the things that they're looking at is the same things that they looked at for tenure and promotion. It's publications, bringing in money, a little bit more consideration of teaching and service in here, but it's the same sort of thing. The other approach is if they don't think this is good enough, you need to sit down with them and develop a professional development plan. And usually you're given another 5 years. But if you don't make it on the second 5 years, you can be gone. So tenure is not forever. necessarily. You got to keep producing. You got to keep satisfying the needs of the university. So in fact, there's a number of ways that tenure can be abrogated, can be removed. Some of them is, breaking the law, um, or personal behavior that's out of bounds. The post-tenure review process that can remove tenure. But there's a couple of other things. One is they can remove tenure by getting rid of an academic unit. And this has been done. There have been units that have been removed and everybody in that unit, is pretty much gone. Or financial emergency. And this has been particularly of interest in recently because of COVID and some of the financial issues with COVID. So I'm going to stop a second. That's sort of a discussion of the tenure process, the promotion process, and things that could knock you out of tenure. Before we go on, any questions, more questions? I've got a few other things to talk about, but any more questions about the whole process? And the thought process of the faculty members you work with. Why 5-year cycles? Don't know. I'm not sure. That's just a number that came up. Postdocs. Postdocs. These postdocs are people that are hired on usually faculty's research grants. They just do research or mentoring of graduate students. And so they're important for people to get trained in things like both doing research, running a research program, and also getting grants. So postdocs really are, sort of apprenticeship for faculty positions. Do you have a resource to share for contract negotiation when up for tenure? I don't directly, but most institutions have, what's expected for tenure. And a good department will make it very clear what's expected. Okay, someone asked, is there a chance for tenure track for cyber facilitators like Henry or Dirk? This would be a rather unusual position. So Henry, I'll let you answer that. Is there a chance for tenure in your sort of position?
So the short answer is almost certainly not, and I'm the exception that proves the rule. So I did get tenure, even though I didn't go through the regular process, but my guess is that most institutions would not pursue that.
Right. And yeah, Dirk just said, a specialist track that does this sort of thing. I'm more familiar of some of the new positions, and I'll talk about this in just a second, some new positions that are really education focused, so that there's a new track that does lead to tenure in some universities that is more focused on the academics, the education, than on research. Yeah, the need for research is not just at research institutions. I have a lot of colleagues that are at four-year colleges, and they have the same sort of publication requirements or similar publication requirements as research faculty. Performance quality compliance standards. Well, again, in terms of the review of what you're doing, you get annual evaluations. And so if the things that you're doing are not acceptable, then you are told about it. So that um, if there are issues of um, academic misconduct, yeah, those things are looked at. And in terms of quality, someone mentioned, the different levels of publications. The research publication quality, for better or worse, is determined by the prestige of the journal or the publication that things come in. Okay, let's move on to a couple of questions that I have. First of all, there's nothing in here about teaching, or very little about teaching. And for research institutions, the tenure decision, the teaching is important, but not as important as a lot of other things. However, it's still important to most faculty. So, for example, in physics, which I'm most familiar with, there's a lot of people that work really hard in improving the educational process, improving the teaching in their institutions. For example, going from something like a class that looks like this, which I can tell you because I teach you, is almost not much teaching at all, to classes that look like this, where things are actually engaged. So people take it seriously. Most faculty are dedicated to their teaching. Not all, but many of them are. They'll talk about how to do it better. They're interested in it. It's just particularly in getting tenure, it's not as recognized for reward as other things. Another thing I mentioned previously, things called professors of practice. And this, Dirk, this might be a little bit like your tenure light. These are professors that are focused on something other than strictly research. So the ones I'm familiar with are more, focused on education and improving education. And they can get either renewable term positions, which are semi-permanent, um, or some of them are tenure track too. So it depends on the institution. So there we go. We've got one of them with us. These are positions that look a little bit different, and they may or may not have the same level of permanence, but it's an indication of the need to do things better. Yep. Yep. Yeah, the term adjunct tends to be less permanent than professors of practice. So professors of practice quite often get 5-year contracts or 7-year contracts, and so it's not year by year they can fire you. It's a little bit more secure. Okay, the next question I had about tenure and the tenure process is, what does it mean for diversity? And this is faculty across all disciplines. So this is not just science and technology, but if you notice, like the full professor, 51% of the full professors look like me. They're white guys. They're old white guys. And let's face it, I don't represent 51% of the population of this country, not even mention the world. Things get a little bit better, but not much when you go down to the assistant professors. These are the people more in the track, but the dark purple are, white males and white females. The lavender are black males and black females, Hispanic, Asian and Pacific Islanders, American natives, essentially they amount to 0%. Good, you are a unicorn. And we need more unicorns, absolutely. And so, there's real questions about how well the tenure process really does deal with diversity. Yeah, this was strictly, this was what I got from the NCES. I did not find anything about diversity of gender. They were binary gender, and I couldn't find anything that looked at diversity of gender. Increasing over time, things have gotten better, but not a whole lot. I know more about what's happened in physics. And in physics, the gender diversity has improved somewhat over the past 15, 20 years. The racial diversity, not so much. It has improved somewhat, but it hasn't improved a lot. And frankly, it's something that's on the top of the agenda for the professional societies that I'm involved with in physics. It's something that we're very aware of and are a lot of efforts to deal with. So, there's no question about, is the tenure really going to help in this direction? The tenure process as it is really going to help in this direction? No. Well, okay. I don't think I can argue with that too much. It's another thing that has come up recently is what has COVID done to this whole process? And this is again from physics. There's a survey of physics faculty. And this is sort of what change happened because of COVID. And basically what this says is that because of COVID, their faculty are spending a lot more of their time on teaching and advising, and research and scholarship has absolutely suffered. That was a major problem because of what happened with COVID. Now, this had a stronger impact on women and underrepresented groups. So it made diversity worse. It made collaborations harder, and it made access to resources impossible in some cases. And so, COVID had a definite impact. It's had a continuing impact too. So, I mean, I hesitate to say we're in the post-COVID world, but we've changed somewhat. But some of the lessons learned in dealing with this shift in time has resulted in a continuing shift in expectations and a little bit more flexibility in expectations on the tenure and promotion process. So it may be that one thing good that came out of COVID is more flexibility in terms of dealing with. Yeah, this is true across the board. It's just that I know the research done in physics and astronomy, the best. One of the professional societies, they are a great statistics center. This has also resulted in new expectations, and I'm not sure if those are all necessarily good. And I'll put in my word of where this has led just recently. This past semester, we had a couple of snow days. Actually, it's Oklahoma, so they were ice days. So we were informed like 14 hours before campus closed that classes next day are going to be online. And so, the expectation, it seems to be coming out of COVID, is that, yeah, you can just switch to online teaching on a dime. I don't think that's necessarily reasonable, but that's my own complaint. But it does have an impact. There's also been a change in the number of people that aren't on the tenure track. So again, this is physics. And so this is the number of non-tenured or tenure track positions over the years. It's been increasing, not real fast, but it's increasing over the years. So institutions are going more towards untenured processes. And a survey from the AAUP about tenure, and about half of the institutions have replaced tenured lines with what they call contingent lines, that's non-tenured lines, in the last 5 years. And so, there's even less, there's fewer and fewer people that are tenured as a function of time. I'll stop a second. There's a lot of discussion going on about the flip online. That's, I don't know if that's a reasonable expectation. I don't think it's a reasonable expectation, but, on the other hand, I will say that, the university here has done a lot to give some of the resources necessary to do this, but, a day is not enough. On the other hand, it turns out that the number of part-time versus full-time positions has gone down somewhat over the years. But, it's still, part-time positions, if you think about all levels of higher ed, is still, close to 50%. And full-time includes both tenured and non-tenured. Part-time are the people that are hired term by term to teach a few courses. So those are the ones that are particularly vulnerable to changes in budgets and support. Yeah, it probably means that full-time people are doing more of the work. I think that what it may mean is that there is more support for the non-tenured but full-time people. And that's a bit of an improvement. So here's the tenure numbers. So talking about percentage, this one's a little bit different because it includes graduates. Includes both graduate employees as well as part-time, non-tenured, and the dark red and the light red are tenured. And what you see is, about 35% total is tenure or tenure track, depending on the level of the institution. And, more and more part-time, particularly at the two-year college and the two-year college and four-year college level. So this is the distribution of what the faculty looks like. If you want if you think faculty should be strongly involved in the running of the university, which faculty feel is important. Um, you know, there's only so many of us that are really doing this. Um, Part-time people, what you will get quite often are people that teach classes at 2, 3, or 4 different institutions. So it's a very unfortunate, you know, sort of itinerant, yeah, effort. And you know, the pay level is uh, pretty low. You know, you get, you know, $5,000 a semester for teaching a class. $5,000, $7,000 to teach a class. So those are the adjunct professors. And so, yeah, I mean, that's the unrepresented class that really, you know, takes it on the ear. And one more thing that I want to talk about before we get to your final exam. No, there is going to be a final exam. The other thing that's going on is, and people mentioned this, is changes, and in fact, in some cases, removal of tenure. So there's any number of states that are working real hard to either reduce or remove tenure for their university because they don't think, I don't know, faculty are doing their jobs. So tenure is something, if you believe in um, the need for freedom of research and freedom of exploration, there are real questions about the future of it as we go on. Okay. Private university, I worked at previously going heavily towards adjunct hiring. Why don't tenure positions? Yep, 3 or 4 different positions. That's exactly what happened. So the question about how can we align our goals as CI to the faculty? Is there should there be more help or focus on one stage versus another? Huh. That is your final exam. So here's your final exam. I want to do this using the Google spreadsheet. So you can put it in the Google spreadsheet. What I want you to do is answer 2 questions, or you can use the chat too. Oh, hang on a second. I got to send it out to everybody. There's the spreadsheet. I have 2 questions for you. And you can interpret them the way you want, but I need an explanation, which is, who do you need to watch out for, considering this list? And who do you need to help? And how do you need to help them? University professors are quite often a little bit like endowed professors, but they're internal. So when someone asks about, do people have internal hires of endowed professors? Quite often university professors are kind of internal endowed professors. So they usually are paid more, maybe have independent money and so forth. Okay. So you can fill out your test. So the test is online, and also any questions that you have, we can keep talking in the chat in terms of any questions you have or things that you want to bring up that I might have skipped over too quickly. Go ahead. Yeah, the transfer, the flip to going online due to COVID, this is true of most universities. But for us, or similar to most universities, for us, we closed the Friday before spring break, and we were supposed to be online the Monday after spring break. So I had exactly 10 days to figure out how I was going to teach online. Um, but again, on the other hand, I will give it to our IT. They did a lot of things to try to prepare us and to help us do this. So there was support uh, to do some of this. And the support you can think about is, how do you support the research effort um, when things go online? Okay, let's see what all we have. Okay, the reviewers for the tenure process. The way that usually happens is that the person going up for tenure does not pick them. What usually happens is that the department picks external reviewers. Depending on the department, the faculty member going up for tenure can make some suggestions. But usually the selection is by the department heads and not the tenure people. So it's usually people well-known lead researchers in their field. And so that's why I said they may or may not know very well what you're doing. Usually you try to get people that are going to know your research, but it's not necessarily um, uh, it's not necessarily going to happen. Okay, I see people are madly typing. I appreciate that. We're officially over. So we ended 2 minutes ago, but any other questions, I'll be around. Any questions or other things that you think we need to bring up? Quite often the push to remove tenure is somewhat political. Um, it's in some cases, well, I'll name one name, Ron DeSantis, and think about why Ron DeSantis might want to remove tenure from the universities of Florida. Well, that's another question about whether he knows what it is or not. Um, Probably knows what it is, but probably also knows that he can make things up too. And I also say that, you're going to have more people talking, more faculty talking later in the workshop. So make sure you get their points of view too, not just mine. And that's going to be real important to get other experience of what faculty need and how faculty are best approached. Funding question. To get funding, you need ideas. It's interesting for funding. One of the best things you can do to learn about the funding process is to get yourself on review panels for the funding institutions, because that will really give you an idea of what the process is, what they're looking for. Um, because sometimes there are very specific grant programs that are looking for very specific things, and this is a way to find out about those. And sometimes they're more general, in which case, yeah, I mean, good, interesting ideas that are, um, that have good foundations. Quite often with grant writing, you need to do about half the research before you even write the grant. And yeah, actually talking to program officers is absolutely crucial. No, it's interesting for the NSF in particular. They want young researchers, not even the faculty, to be on the review panels. So it's not just big name profs or so forth that are on the review panels. You'll get a wide selection of people. But the first thing to do, always, as Ashley said, is talk to the program officers. Actually, quite often, if you go to like the NSF website, there'll be places where they'll ask to sign up for, different programs. Or when you talk to a program officer, tell him or her that, yeah, I'm interested in being on a review panel. And they have a list. And believe me, they will pull you off that list. If you get your name on the list, they will come knocking on your door because they always have needs for people to do reviews. Good questions. Anything else? Yep, absolutely. Um, um, you don't necessarily have to be a PhD to be a PI, but you do have to have, it needs to be clear that you have support. Okay. Well, I think we're about done. Henry, is there anything else? I'll leave you, Henry, your job is to grade the final. I'll leave that to you as my TA.
Okay, well, I'll start by saying I get an A, so. All
Okay.
right. So I want to thank Bruce, as always, just amazing. And very grateful for the presentation you've given and the insights and sharing your experience and wisdom. I know experience and wisdom always come at a cost, so I'm glad that we get to be the beneficiaries of that cost that you paid. And everybody make sure you get your homework done, and we are reconvening at 1:15. So we'll be talking about cyber infrastructure, user support, and now we will be forearmed with knowledge and understanding of academic structures. And I think that's going to carry us through the entire week. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Bruce. Everybody give Bruce a round of virtual applause. And I will keep the session open. I'm going to stop the recording. And we'll see you in about 20 minutes.
Okay. Thank you all for a great session and all
Thank
your
you.
questions.